We're pushing hard to get Brew Pig launched. Look, the bilge is even painted and lovely. This week I want to show you how we went from these puny little mounts to these bad boys. Brew Pig was a sunken fishing trawler that's been brought back to life with the help of volunteers and funded by our Patreons, community and supporters. She'll be crewed by passionate people from around the world. If you'd like to be involved and support the project, please consider joining us on Patreon or subscribe to the channel on YouTube.
Time to take these plates back off and make proper mounts out of them. Those are the gearbox mounts. That line is roughly where the engine bay is going to sit. So we have room for shock fast right here. And on top of it we're going to do gussets, like 4 gussets. And I'm going to trim off that end here now. So, that out. That's all of them cut out and cleaned up. So now it's time to make the small ones that are gonna sit in the middle, like so. So that's how the gearbox mounts eventually gonna end up. I'm about to drill the holes. We're gonna basically copy that design. That's gonna be our center line for the holes. That's basically where the new engine bay is gonna start. We're basically drilling exactly at the center of the piece that's covering the engine bays.
This level of human grunting is what happens when the battery's flat on your little rattle gun. Look at the brute force that's going into this. That's weeks of like preparation. Weights, peanut butter sandwiches, you name it. You better believe it. You can look at the clouds fly by. Come on and let yourself. So we need to start putting together the gearbox mounts. These are the ones that Burke's put together. So we've got our drill plate. We've got our this is 12mm. We've got 16mm plate. So we've got 3 clearance holes for our bolts, and then we've got 2 tapped holes for our adjustment. Then we've got our gussets. So time to glue all of this together. Couple of tacks on each plate to hold everything together. Welding. Okay, welding. Quick check before we put the gussets in. Yeah, it's good enough. Okay, welding. Welding. Add the gussets so we can make the whole structure rigid. Welding. Now time to start welding this whole thing together. With the gussets able to be tacked in, we can start getting some real rigidity into this mount, and then we do one layer of weld around every joint. It's surprising just how much work and welding is involved in each one of these mounts. There's not an enormous amount of physical length on each mount, but every single weld has to be double continuous. So on this joint here, you can see I'm welding on one side and the other side's already welded. That has to happen on every single joint wherever there is a gusset or steel or anything to join. So I want to give everyone context around engine mount size. This is the standard mount that goes on our Cummins, and it's pretty substantial. It's sort of 1/2 inch steel. You got gussets. There's 5 bolts in total on each side, one on either side of the engine. So, you know, pretty decent. It's fairly heavy steel. That's not going anywhere. Now, the gearbox mounts, they have to take thrust, so they're slightly bigger normally. I want to show you the gearbox mounts that are standard with this gearbox. If I spin round, here we go, so you can see them here. Let me show you that with a ruler. These are the standard gearbox mounts for our gearbox, so 38 centimeters or 380mm long. They're fairly chunky, they're cast iron, plenty of bolts holding them on, and then if you look down here, you've got 3 bolts running along there. That bolts 3 bolts down to the engine bed. And then there are our mounts. Now these are bigger again. So there's no way that this gearbox is going anywhere. So everything we've done with either heavier steel, higher grade steel, or we've just physically made things bigger. So let me put that in context with the standard Cummins mount. So another example of over-engineering it for safety is these engine beds. So the standard mount in Brupeg was a piece of 12mm steel, 100mm by 12mm flat bar. This ran along the top there, and the gearbox sat on top of that and took all of the thrust of the boat. There was a piece of, I think it was like 50mm by 12mm vertical down here, and a 6mm gusset in here that they'd basically ground away, so it was practically not there. And it was just linked to a 6mm bulkhead at this end and a 6mm bulkhead down at this end here. We've left those two bulkheads in, we've tied this piece in. This is now 16mm rather than 12mm. We've got a 12mm gusset that runs underneath here. We've tied it into the rib back here, and we've also welded it onto the hull plate as well as the structural beam back here. The hull plate is not actually really for strength, it's mainly to stop water and rubbish going underneath the mount and rusting the boat out. We've also added in a wedge of steel along here, which is more steel than what was originally there because they'd cut it away as they changed engines and gearboxes over the years. Brupeg's had about 4 different engines. As they mucked around and modified and altered things and whatever, they hacked out some of the structural member, we put it all back in, and then we added more steel. So whilst these have not been designed by a naval architect, I'm absolutely confident that they're stronger than Brupeg ever had before. Duncan's back up for another trip. So the plan is I was hoping to have the engine mounts and gearbox mounts and everything built, and we'd be chock fasting, so that's the epoxy compound that goes between the two. I was hoping that we'd be doing that when Duncan's here, but probably a bit too ambitious, that goal. However, next stage, we've got to join these two together. So engine and gearbox, they're going to come together and bolt up, then we're going to lift the whole unit assembly up, take all of the blocks and everything out underneath. We're going to drop it back down, put all the mounts on, drop it back down, and do a rough alignment, so within a millimetre, cooey, something like that. And then we're going to start looking at our front engine mount design. Now we don't have to get the alignment perfect at this stage, we just have to know what we're going to build for our front engine mount.
Look what happened, Eric. Thank you very much for this, and you giving me this, cause this.
Now that we have our gearbox mounts built, we need to bolt the gearbox to the engine, then bolt the mounts onto the gearbox, and then lift the engine and gearbox assembly into the hull so that we can start to figure out how we're going to do our alignment.
Oh, actually, you know what we could do? We could put the little one sideways, like down there somewhere. Yeah. Yep. That's probably pretty blooming close.
It must be close.
So you're not having to bend?
Oh yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
You probably have to rotate it a bit.
That's okay. So where are we? Is it light?
Yep.
So we've got to go that way on the gearbox. Okay, here we go.
Yep. I'll take that in.
Okay, let's hold there. Let's get one more.
Now that the gearbox and engine are connected, we can start putting the bell housing bolts in.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, yeah!
I'm so looking forward to giving this a bloody good wash.
Time to get these mounts bolted back on.
Got about that much movement on this one. So
Okay.
I have to lift it and just clear this stuff out.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Let's lose this from here. Let's come down, yeah?
We now need to drop the engine down and bring it back so it lines up with the propeller shaft. believe it or not, this footage is sped up. Everything does happen pretty slow when you're working with chain blocks, so you can do very fine adjustments.
So in order to get our alignment of this correct, we got the original gearbox bolts, high tensile gearbox bolts, the M16. Beck's already put the thread in here, but I think there might be a bit of weld splatter or something in because the thread's a bit gnarly when it gets halfway in. So what we need to do, there's one there, and we put them in, and these are essentially adjustment screws, so they'll just go up and down, so they'll rock this back and forth to get the alignment on the prop shaft to coupling perfect. With these guys down like that, it basically acts as our adjuster.
So we drop the gearbox down onto those screws, and then we can just ease them off to get our height right.
How parallel are the two faces of the flanges?
The nose needs to come up more.
It's the same, yeah, nose has to come.
Yep. We're going to have to reset this because we still need to go back. Yep.
Okay, should we try?
Yeah, so let's come back. Okay, let's come back slightly.
Lifting, I think.
That's okay. Yep, keep coming, keep coming. That's good, keep doing.
I think we have to loosen the
So loose in front.
Loose in front?
Yeah, yeah. Yep. And come back.
Still lifting.
Loose at the front of it. Okay, wait.
Yep.
That one at the front is too far. It's too much angle, it's causing too many issues.
Yeah. So you want it back that way somehow?
I do.
We could do some straps around behind the mounts there.
With the gearbox now lining up with the prop shaft, we can just put the bolts in by hand. These are finger tight, so it gives you an idea of how sort of closely fit this is when it's done right.
Okay, so you're at the front. That's...
The front, I can loosen the front one.
Yep. So, yep, come down.
What's your fingers?
Come on. Switch.
Okay, hold it.
Need more?
So we need to go that way.
Yeah.
You're getting that. Slightly high and I'm slightly left. I've got to go.
I can
I'm gonna go
more.
down that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just gonna get that on. Put one down.
How much are you heat experience in you?
Yep.
Okay, hold it. That's too close. Yeah, keep going. So what I'm looking for is the gap on this side to be the same as the gap on this side here, and on this side over here I've got maybe 3mm, and this side I've got maybe 2mm. So what that means is the front of the engine was being pulled across that way with a strap. We need to take that off, put a strap over there and pull it that way, just so that we can even that up. But it's pretty much wanting to fall into place with that spigot. The spigot's guiding it in, but we're going super gentle on it just to make sure that we can actually get it in without causing any damage.
The reason we're trying to get this aligned, or what seems like we're trying to do a final alignment, is actually so that we can just figure out where the engine has to sit so we can build the front engine mount correctly.
So what's moving?
Yeah, it's pretty close there. Come up at the front.
More?
Keep going. Keep going.
Keep going?
Yeah. Okay. Wait. Okay. I want to unplug them, and then I want to dial gauge it to make sure that we're not putting pressure on the gearbox or anything like that, on the prop shaft.
Yeah, you're right.
Right now it's pressing down on this because we haven't done the centre to centre alignment. We've just done the getting it in that way. So I want to take the whole thing forward so that it's free of this. And then I want to put the dial gauge on and spin the dial gauge around to make sure that we're absolutely perfect.
Okay.
So
So
let's
you want to do that?
get rid of that. So we need to get the motor forward
Yes.
without twisting it or doing anything weird.
No sweat.
So
Okay.
let's work on that front mount. We get the front mount in and lose the chain block.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Actually, you know what? We need to keep this clear for the door, so we actually need to put this back on a slight angle. But that's good enough for now. We can move it back for now.
So that's actually enough for short runs.
Yeah.
Even so, it's just.
Yeah.
Maybe I would like to know how much, but.
Yeah.
20 mil. Yeah.
Are you confident enough that I can check if it's really training?
Yeah. Obviously, given that I was measuring at an angle, I've got a plus or minus 1 millimeter.
Oh my gosh, look how perfect that is.
Huh.
That's training mode.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
That's amazing. You're spooky.
So I've got it like aligned, like the faces of the flange. If you imagine you've got two big metal discs. So
Those
you've got
ones?
disc 1 and disc 2.
Yep.
So what I need to do, I've got them aligned like top to bottom that way. So the prop shaft is on a 6-degree angle. The engine has to be on a 6-degree angle, and they're pretty much within, like, I don't know, 20 thou something at the moment, like probably even less than that, 10 thou or something like that at the moment. And side to side, when you measure them from looking down on top, side to side, they're pretty much the same as well. They're pretty even. So much so that I can just screw the bolts in by hand. Like there's nothing weird going on with that. So it's roughly aligned in that sense, but it's not center to center alignment. So right now, theoretically, they could be bolted together, and because of that spigot, if we weigh the engine on it, we've got, like, say, a ton of weight dangling off the front of the prop shaft, we're going to nuke the prop shaft if we leave it like that, so you absolutely can't do that. But what I need to do is get the engine and drag it forward so that it's not connected in any way to the prop shaft. I then take this tool, which is a magnet base, so you've got a little on-off switch for your magnet here, and you can clamp it to metal and so on. What I want to do is clamp it to the gearbox output shaft, and then I can adjust these arms. I can swing these arms all around and put them in weird positions. And then this is a really, really precise dial indicator. So it'll tell me from there to there is 10 millimeters, going up in 0.01 millimeter increments. So each line is 0.01 of a millimeter. So what I want to do is clamp it to the gearbox and rotate it all the way around the prop shaft so that I can see if the gearbox is slightly off to one side, or like I could have these faces perfect, like top to bottom perfect, but if it's off to one side by a millimeter, I'd never actually know. So you have to do the feeler gauge test to make sure that you've got it like aligned that way, but you have to do the dial gauge test to make sure you got center to center alignment. If you don't have that, you'll destroy your prop shaft, you'll destroy your bearings and your gearbox and so on. So it's really, really critical. Once more into the frame. Okay. Alright, let's go.
All right.
Going even.
Okay, I'm on tension now.
Just you guys ready?
Yep.
Alright, so go forward. Good. That's it. Yep.
That was too easy.
It was a bit of weight, so it was worth doing.
Did we keep centre?
A little bit. So as we came out, the prop went sort of up a fraction.
Okay.
So
So it might have been a bit of pressure then.
yeah. So
On the
we
edge.
definitely had to move it. Well, engine's in.
We know it's going to fit.
Yeah.
Yep.
The couple.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's gonna sit low, and we're gonna have space.
Yeah.
Look at how much space we have here now.
It feels so weird having it like not towering above us.
You can see the
Yeah.
total right above.
Yeah, you can right above the engine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, interesting exercise would be looking at the number of mount points for the chain blocks and all the blue straps.
Yeah.
I wonder if in video you can superimpose everything all set up together. Because you'd have what? You'd almost have 10.
Oh, easy.
Yeah.
3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Actually, before I go out of the engine room, a common question that's often in the comments about, why don't we do certain things in the engine room? People often talk about a gantry crane. Why don't we put a gantry crane into the engine room so we can lift heavy stuff around? That would be awesome if we had cathedral height ceiling. However, if we put a gantry crane in here, we lose about 6 inches from the beam, then we lose about another 6 inches for the trolley, and then we lose about another 10 inches for the chain block. So then that's where you start lifting from.
You're enjoying this way
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah, I am. So just to answer everybody's question and to put the comments at bay, it's just not possible to do any sort of roof lifting other than like really small tight hooks against the roof because we just don't have enough physical headroom.
And maybe also say you're standing
Yeah.
in the only standable spot right now.
I'm standing in the. I'm short and I'm standing in the bilge, and that's how much headroom I've got.
And Jess is standing on the floorboards, and
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
pretty small. Still has to bend over
Yeah.
quite a lot.
Well, there's a reason I'm sitting in a chair right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're just peeling most of the engine off.
The clean up, the great clean up.
The great clean up.
Yeah.
I clean up at 23.
Oh, I survived the clean up. Look how much room we've got in here. So, This is crazy. I've not seen the engine and gearbox this low for so long. It's awesome. All right, rear engine mounts are done. The beds, they're all done enough. We can leave those for now. We have to focus on this front mount. So this piece of black steel here is our original mount. It used to bolt on with these two bolts here, and that slot allows it to have some adjustment if we ever needed it. There's also a slot, the bolt holes are slotted on that black beam, the 16mm beam, to allow the motor to go left and right. Now, what I want to do is build a sort of adjustable engine mount, so left and right and up and down, but I also need to modify each end of this. So I want to bring this end here, I want to put it back on these original bolts, and I want to sort of do a kink to go up to wherever this has to go at the front. So the engine mount will be a bit of a sort of a whoopsie shape like that. That's what I've got to figure out today and get that built. Alright, that's up, lovely. So we had a bit of a ponder and we've decided on a plan. We have to bring this forward about 100mm. Let me get my measuring stick. So if we put something on there, 100mm takes us basically to the front of those engine mounts, which is enough. However, we can't go forward on this engine bed because there's a weird bit of stainless weld here. I really don't want to just grind all of that off. It's going to be a nightmare. So I'm going to go push this as far forward as I can. I can't go any further forward than that there anyway. So even if I cut this weird thing off, I'm only going to gain 45mm, something like that. The door swings in there, so I can't go any further forward than there. I'm going to jam the door. Alright, I've got terrible lighting, so I'm going to try and show you this anyway. This is the original engine mount. Normally this is the front. This is now going to become the front over here. We're spinning it around backwards. That's because this vertical gusset here is designed to take the bending load that way, but we're going to be extending it out 100mm, so I'm putting it basically in the middle of the plate. If I leave it where it is now, extend it out 100mm this way, we're going to be pretty good in terms of the centre. So that's why I'm doing it that way. I'm also going to put some vertical gussets under here to take some of that bending load, and then same on the back, so we've got a really super strong front mount. This is our centre line. This is the edge, the left hand side of the engine beds, the current engine foot. This is the maximum extremity of movement, so we want to be able to build this so that it can go side to side, hence the old slots, they used to do exactly the same. So we want to build this to go side to side, so we're allowing 20mm on this side, and then we've got the same on this side, 20mm over here. This little line here, this is going to be a block of 13mm steel with a 16mm threaded hole that goes through it, and it's just going to be an adjuster screw that goes back and forth like so to push the beds either left or right. And then under the centre we're going to have another screw that comes up here that does vertical height. So the plan is basically get this piece welded to the front, cut it to the size, etc. And then we'll fit it into the boat again, and we'll start figuring out our gussets and that sort of design. There we go. So it's going to hang out this side. I've got it sitting backwards, but basically gives me an idea of the shape. And then we're going to do gussets sort of underneath it. So I reckon this is going to be pretty stout. In fact, I might do gussets in the middle here because I've got to do an adjuster bolt there, and I've got to do a bolty down bolt over here and here, and I don't know how much room I'll have on this side. I had to cut it that length because I only had 500mm. That's 500mm from there to there, and I only had 500mm material, so that's why we're sort of limited with that. But I reckon that's going to work out right. 2 gussets, central adjuster bolt, and then 2 big bolts down the side to bolt it down, and the side left to right adjusters. And again, remember the dainty little original Cummins mounts, and then compare them to what this is going to be in case you're wondering about strength. 2 bits ground up, ready to join. So big chamfer on that, you can see there, same as what we've done with all the other 16mm. That face gets joined to this face here, so we've got a great big chamfer there, and then basically ripped all the paint off the weld and everything underneath, so we can fill that up with a pretty big chunky weld. So time to glue these together, tack them up on the bench here, and then we'll weld them up in the boat. I've got the little stick welder out, mainly because this thing weighs about 3 kgs and I can't be bothered pulling the big welder down. Normally if I was going to pull the big welder down I'd MIG it, but I'm going to stick weld this together as a tack, then we're going to take it upstairs and MIG it properly. Now let's do one more weld and then let's bend it back straight. So it looks a bit brutal, but these big thick plates here are bending it back straight. So we'll just fill that up with weld now. Going to go on the same spot that I tacked. This is why I don't really like stick welding. So things have progressed. I'm going to take this whole thing up now and I'll weld this and this seam here. So we've got top and bottom nicely fed with some MIG wire. I made a couple of gussets. This one's slightly wrong angle, but we can fill out with weld. This one's good. These are 16mm plate, both of them. This is 16 and all of this original stuff is 16. So this thing's going to be bucket load stronger than it was and probably quite a bit heavier.
Now that I've tacked it together, it's time to do a couple of longer runs underneath where we're going to put these gussets in. And then in order to figure out where these are actually going to go, I need to find a centre line and then start measuring out from that point. Then put the first tack in, and that allows me to straighten anything up as it bends and warps when you weld it. With it now straight, we can put a small tack in each corner, and that allows me to weld it out fully without it bending or warping or doing anything untoward. Now that I've got my positions for the other one marked out, I can just duplicate it across to the second gusset and repeat the process. Now that the gussets are tacked in underneath, that's going to give this extension piece a huge amount more rigidity when I weld it out fully. This is definitely going to warp when I weld it because there's a huge amount of heat, but by having the gussets in there, it holds it in a much straighter orientation. I want to quickly spin it over so that I can put the equivalent weld on the underside to counteract any warping from having the heat on one side only. And this is why I wanted to have the smaller welds underneath the gussets before I did this part, so that I can just do one bead across the whole thing at this point.
So now that we've got the front done, made a little cardboarded template. I'm going to put that in there like that. I'm going to, obviously, I'm just getting 2 angles at this stage. I need to do, let's sit that down. I need to basically cut it on a 45 over here so that it looks pretty, but that's my outer extremity and that's my top extremity there. We'll see what we can do with steel. I'm going to make 2 of those, put them at the back. What that'll do is any downward pressure here, so this is upside down at the moment, any pressure that's pushing down here will try and push this whole thing backwards and twist it. So if I put a gusset in there, it's going to stiffen the whole thing up. So once we've got those in, we're ready to start fitting this and see if we can assemble up the front. Duncan's in the battery hole. What are you doing?
So we've got the Victron VE Direct to USB converted cable, which is that's the USB end. We've got the other ends now plugged into the Victron VE Direct network. At the moment we've got 4 charge controllers and 1 shunt hooked up to that. So the idea is we'll take USB up to the bridge, and that'll become part of what we've been calling the engine monitoring system. So I'll do up an electrical panel there, and that way we can import all of the solar data live and then display that, and Damien can then monitor the performance of the system.
So it'll be what the sort of data that's showing here. Let me see if I can get that to zoom. Bit hard to show on the screen, but basically that's the Bluetooth app that Victron give you, and shows you basic stuff from each charge controller down to battery aggregates using the shunt. We want to be able to see that in a more convenient space, so that's why we're putting it up on the wheelhouse as well.
I'm just taking the opportunity to tidy up some of the cabling. So we've had generations of cabling and projects and whatever, so very conscious of us finishing this job off in a robust sort of way. So I'm just tidying up some of the cabling while we're at it.
There we go, gussets on both sides welded in. Right, tightest camera angle in the history of the world. This is the front of the engine. This is the harmonic balancer, and that there is the front of the crankshaft. This part here is the foot that bolts on. This is the front engine mount. So there's one part of it here and the other half exactly the same but on the other side of the harmonic balancer. So we've got 2 bolts essentially at the front of the engine that hold this thing down. Now this is the mount that I've built. So this part here is obviously original, and then we've done the little extension at the front so that we can cope with the engine being moved forward. You can sort of see it's been moved forward about maybe 6 inches, maybe 7 inches, something like that. So 150, 175 mil, something like that. What I need to do now is drill and tap in the center down here, so I can put a bolt that comes from the bottom that can adjust the engine up and down when we're trying to align. And I'm also going to weld a tab on here, and same on the other side with a thread with a bolt that hits over here that pushes the engine side to side. So this gives me basically 2-dimensional control of the engine at this end. I don't need forward and back because the prop shaft isn't going to move, and that's the only thing that can determine what's going on with that. So I don't need to worry about that. But I do need to add in basically some ability to lift this thing up and down, push it side to side. Right, so I've made these 2 little blocks of goodness. That's an M18 by 1.5 thread, and the engine's almost hard over to the side, so that basically sits in there like that, gets welded in there. And then there's another one, this guy here, that gets welded over here, something like that. And they can push the engine left and right. So let's get those guys welded in, then we'll take this whole thing out and start drilling and tapping the center one that does vertical adjustment. Rightio, they're now welded in nice and tight. Time to get this front mount out so we can cut the hole for the vertical alignment and tap that thread.
A quick rule that we use all the time when we're drilling and tapping holes on metric bolts: take the size of your bolt, in this case M18, minus the thread pitch, in this case 1.5 millimeters, and you end up with a 16.5 mil hole that needs to be drilled so you can tap it. A common misconception is you need to go forward and back when you're tapping. That only applies if you're tapping a blind hole. In this case the hole goes all the way through, so the chips can clear out by just falling out the bottom. Have a guess what weight you think this front engine mount finally came out to be.
Pause the video and put your answer in the comments what you think it'll be. What do you reckon it is?
40. 39.
39 kgs.
I think I'm pretty close with my 40.
Yeah, you were. So we need to allow the propeller to slide backwards. So time to release this jack and let this whole thing come back about 4 inches. There we go. You can see the clearance up at that end there now.
This is what Damien would look like boxing in a cartoon.
Right, now that wee mission's over, we need to take these mounts off, give them a clean up, so like round off any edges and clean up any welds we're not happy with, etc. And then go and get these sandblasters. We're going to blast them over at the mechanic shop. He's got a little blast cabinet we can use. Right then, so I'll get the big rattle gun. This was donated by Michael Love. Thank you very much. This is an amazing tool. God, who built these things so big? Done. Let's get these blasted. So these are some mates of ours, Bundaberg Marine Maintenance. These guys do heaps of like basically yacht, boat repairs, etc. That's where our old compressor ended up. So the old green compressor you might remember from years ago, that's tucked away in there. These guys do outboards and engines. They got lathes, mills, putting a little Westerbake in something. Little genset by the looks of it, it's pretty cool. And then they got some bigger stuff over here. But the reason I'm here today is to use this guy. So in here, that is one of our gearbox mounts down there. We've got the other one sitting there, and then the front mount. I don't think we'll get this one in, but we'll give it a shot anyway. So we're going to try and sandblast those today.
So this is quite a bit slower than our old wet blaster, but with a bit of patience you can get a pretty decent finish on this, good enough to paint. So you can see this one's fully blasted right the way over. I started to run out of time on this one. I only got this front face done, the rest of it I haven't done yet, and that back one I can't actually get that into the cabinet, so I didn't bother with that one. These guys here, they're blasted up ready to go though for paint, so yeah, that surface is pretty nice. It's kind of aggressive. You want the aggressive finish if you're going to paint steel, and that's the only thing that pretty much allows paint to hang on to steel. So time for some paint. We use Joe-Damastic 90. It's a really high build paint, so a lot of solids in this paint. It's very, very thick, and it allows you to then sand off and get the surface really beautifully smooth.
A trick if you've ever mixed up lots of 2-pack and you need it to not set so fast because you want to do a second coat, put it in the freezer and it stops the reaction, or it slows it down. That's mixed up a few hours ago and you can still see it's liquid, so by the time I mix this and give it a warm up, it's good to go for another coat.
You can see here it's still pretty solid. It's been sitting only for about 5 minutes or so out of the freezer. Once that warms up a bit more, it'll be a bit more runny.
Right, that's 2 layers of high build epoxy etch on the face that you see on the mounts. These are the gearbox mounts. So you see this part here and this part here, and then over on the big one, this is the front. So got a decent layer on this front and then a thin layer at the back there. So basically 2 coats on both of them on one side, so we need to flip these over and do the other side as well. It's probably going to take us a couple of days, maybe 3 days in total, to get all the painting done, because we can only do coats every sort of 6 hours or so. It's relatively cold, it's Australia winter, so it takes a fair while for 2-pack paint to start going hard, sort of 6 hours, maybe 8 hours in some cases. Yeah, we can get 2 coats a day done on the etch, and we like to chemically bond them, so we don't like them to be set, we like them to be sort of like firm tacky sort of thing, and then put the second layer on, because then you get a chemical etch in between the 2 layers of paint. The top, we let it go fairly hard, so we let it set for about 24 hours or so at least, and then do the top coat, mainly because I like to give it a light sand with 240 grit just to like really make it look pretty, essentially. You're going to be seeing these are going to be pretty visual, so it takes 10 minutes to give them a nice sand up, and they start looking really nice when we put the top coat onto. We need to start working on the inside of the boat, so we don't have a lot of paint on the inside. We've got quite a lot of work to do on the inside before we can put the rest of the paint down, so sanding and things like that. That's going to happen over the next day or two. And then what are we doing then? Then we are dropping the engine, bolting all the stuff back on, dropping the engine back down, aligning it properly, and doing the chock fast.